Doesn't mean we can't delay him. And his name is Voldemort. Phileas, you might as well use it. He's going to try to kill you either way.
Dame Maggie Smith, or your favorite Minerva Mcgonagall in HP, was the undisputed queen of screen and stage for 7 decades. She had this razor-sharp wit, a terrifying side eye, and a wall around her private life that was practically impenetrable. To the rest of the world, she was a total icon, an acting titan, and, of course, the fiercest wizard to ever step foot in Hogwarts. But, off-camera, Maggie was notoriously guarded. She didn't just let anyone into her inner circle. So, who were the handful of people who actually managed to crack that ironclad exterior and win the absolute fierce devotion of Britain's ultimate leading lady? To Harry, with love. It all started with a wide-eyed 9-year-old kid who had zero clue his entire life was about to change forever. Before he ever set foot in Hogwarts, before the lightning bolt scar became a global icon, and long before the world knew his name, Daniel Radcliffe was just a 9-year-old kid auditioning for a BBC television miniseries. The project was an adaptation of Charles Dickens's David Copperfield, and the production was searching for a young actor who could anchor a massive period drama opposite some of the biggest names in British acting. Sitting at the very top of that theatrical food chain was Dame Maggie Smith. When 9-year-old Daniel walked onto the set to portray the young David Copperfield, he was understandably terrified. He was facing an acting titan, a woman with 2 Academy Awards, a fierce reputation, and a gaze that could wither a lesser actor from 50 paces. But what happened next set the stage for one of the most heartwarming mentor relationships in modern cinema history. Maggie didn't look at Daniel as an inexperienced kid who might slow down production. She saw raw, natural talent, an unvarnished innocence, and a work ethic that instantly won her over. During their scenes together, she took him under her wing, guiding him through the grueling process of screen acting not with stern lectures, but with patience, warm humor, and quiet encouragement. The connection between them was instant. Daniel later recalled how she managed to completely demystify the intimidating world of professional acting for him, making him feel like an equal on set, despite the massive gap in their ages and experience. Then came the year 2000. Warner Brothers was launching an exhaustive, high-stakes global search to cast the lead role in the film adaptation of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Director Chris Columbus and producer David Heyman were auditioning hundreds of child actors across the United Kingdom, struggling to find a boy who possessed the specific blend of vulnerability, intelligence, and quiet bravery required to play the boy who lived. Enter Maggie Smith. Having already been cast as the formidable Professor Minerva Mcgonagall, Maggie didn't hesitate. She went straight to the filmmakers with a single uncompromising recommendation. Look at Daniel Radcliffe. She insisted that the producers watch his performance in David Copperfield, telling them in no uncertain terms that this was the young man they were looking for. It wasn't just a casual suggestion, it was a championing of talent from a woman whose artistic judgment was absolute. Maggie personally paved the way for Daniel's audition, securing the role that would change his life and pop culture forever. When cameras began rolling on the Harry Potter series, their dynamic evolved into something truly special. Across 8 films and more than a decade of shooting at Leavesden Studios, Maggie remained Daniel's fiercest protector and most devoted cheerleader. The movie set was a chaotic pressure cooker of global fame, massive budgets, and relentless media scrutiny. But inside that world, Maggie was a steady, grounding force for the young star. On set, their rapport was a mix of deep mutual respect and playful banter. Daniel famously recalled one of his earliest memories of working with her on Harry Potter. He was so nervous about interacting with a dame of the British Empire that he asked her, "Should I call you Dame Maggie?" To which she reportedly flashed her classic dry smile and replied, "Don't be ridiculous, call me Maggie." As Daniel grew from a child into a young man under the spotlight, Maggie watched his development with maternal pride. She didn't treat him like a child star. She treated him like a colleague in training. She showed him how to navigate long days on set, how to respect the craft, and how to maintain humor even when wearing heavy woolen robes in the middle of summer. More importantly, she shielded him. If she sensed the young cast was being overworked or pushed too hard by the frantic production schedules, Maggie would use her massive clout to step in, ensuring the kids were treated fairly and protected from the industry's harsh edges. For Daniel, her admiration was never something taken for granted. He watched her work up close, observing how she could command an entire room with a subtle shift in her posture or the delivered flick of an eyebrow. Even during her bravest personal battle, when she was diagnosed with breast cancer while filming Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Maggie insisted on pushing through treatment so she wouldn't delay production or let down her young co-stars. Her sheer resilience left an indelible mark on Daniel, instilling in him a standard of professionalism and courage that he carries to this day. By the time the final film wrapped, their bond had come full circle. The frightened 9-year-old boy from David Copperfield had become a respected leading man, and the formidable dame who took a chance on him remained one of his most cherished, lifelong friends. Their story wasn't just about standard movie set camaraderie. It was about genuine, fierce loyalty, the kind of love that saw a legend look at a total novice, spot his spark, and protect it at all costs. Well, that's everybody's favorite Harry-Minerva duo in the HP movie series. Yet, while she nurtured young talent, there was another wizard on set whose sardonic wit matched her own step for step. The soft heart behind the Snape sneer. Did you guess this right? Because from loving and admiring a Gryffindor, Maggie did love the great Half-Blood Prince, a certified Slytherin. If you watched them on screen as Professor McGonagall and Severus Snape, you saw two formidable magical authority figures who traded sharp glances and maintained a tense professional distance. But the second the director yelled, "Cut," the ice completely melted. In reality, Maggie Smith and Alan Rickman shared one of the most delightful, deeply affectionate, and hilarious friendships in all of British acting. Long before they ever put on wizard robes together, Maggie and Alan were cut from the very same artistic cloth. Both were royalty of the British stage, having spent decades mastering the classical theatre circuit. They shared a bone-deep reverence for the craft of acting, an instinct for comedic timing, and, most importantly, a delightfully dry, mischievous sense of humor. When they were cast alongside each other in the Harry Potter franchise, their dynamic on set became legendary among the cast and crew. A blockbuster movie set can be an overwhelming circus of green screens, mechanical props, and endless waiting around for lighting setups. While younger actors might have been overwhelmed, Maggie and Alan transformed the background of the Great Hall into their personal playground of quiet banter. They would sit together in their heavy woolen costumes, exchanging sharp observations, rolling their eyes at technical delays, and whispering dry one-liners that would send each other into fits of silent laughter. Daniel Radcliffe later noted that watching the two of them interact off-camera was like witnessing a masterclass in effortless charm and dry British comedy. Alan had a deep, brooding voice that could intimidate an entire room, but around Maggie, that imposing exterior vanished. He melted into a warm, giggling companion who relished every bit of her famously razor-sharp wit. Beyond the shared laughs, Maggie admired Alan for his immense generosity as an artist. While the public often associated Rickman with his dark, villainous roles, from Hans Gruber in Die Hard to Snape, Maggie knew the truth about his character. He was one of the kindest, most supportive men in show business. Alan was famous for quietly attending the small theater productions of young, up-and-coming actors, offering mentorship, advice, and financial support without ever asking for publicity. Maggie deeply respected that total lack of ego. In a world full of showy Hollywood personalities, Alan was a serious actor who took his work seriously, but never took himself seriously. Their bond was also tested and proven during some of their most vulnerable moments. During the filming of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, when Maggie was undergoing treatment for breast cancer, Alan was right there beside her. He offered quiet, unwavering support on set, giving her space when she needed it, keeping her spirits lifted with his trademark wit. and ensuring she felt looked after amid exhausting shoot days. That mutual care went both ways. Maggie championed Alan's theater directorial work and was always in the audience to support his creative endeavors outside of Hogwarts. When Alan tragically passed away in 2016 from pancreatic cancer, the loss hit Maggie exceptionally hard. The world mourned a cinematic icon, but Maggie mourned a kindred spirit, a rare colleague who understood the absurdities of fame, shared her theatrical soul, and made her laugh when the days were long. In her tributes and private recollections, she spoke of him not just as a brilliant performer who possessed a singular voice, but as an extraordinarily gentle soul whose friendship was a true gift. Their connection wasn't built on Hollywood networking or PR-friendly moments. It was a deep, quiet camaraderie forged in shared laughter, mutual respect, and a lifetime of loving the stage. If Rickman was her equal in dry comedy, could anyone match the eccentric majesty of Hogwarts' greatest headmaster? The Dumbledores, Michael Gambon and Richard Harris. To command the screen opposite a legend like Maggie Smith, an actor needed more than just talent. They needed a sheer, inescapable magnetism. Enter the two grand titans who brought Hogwarts' legendary headmaster Albus Dumbledore to life, Richard Harris and Sir Michael Gambon. Behind the scenes of the magical franchise, Maggie's relationships with these two theatrical powerhouses were defined by deep mutual reverence, outrageous behind-the-scenes antics, and a shared history that stretched back to the golden era of British theatre. Maggie's love and connection with Michael Gambon, in particular, was forged decades before either of them ever set foot in Hogwarts. In the early 60s, both were young, hungry actors recruited by Sir Laurence Olivier to join the foundational company of the Royal National Theatre at the Old Vic. It was an intense, high-pressure artistic pressure cooker, and amid the grueling rehearsals of classical Shakespearean plays, Maggie and Gambon discovered a shared comedic sensibility that was completely irreverent. They were theatrical rebels who took the craft of acting with supreme seriousness, yet refused to take themselves or the surrounding pomp and circumstance seriously at all. When Gambon joined the Harry Potter cast as Dumbledore following the third film, his reunion with Maggie was like rekindling an old, joyful fire. On a movie set often bogged down by heavy special effects and lengthy technical setups, the two of them became an unstoppable double act of warmth and mischief. Gambon was notorious for his playful pranks and habitual corpseing, the theatrical term for breaking character and bursting into laughter on camera. Maggie, with her legendary dry delivery, was both his primary target and his favorite accomplice. Between takes in the Great Hall, dressed in their elaborate, heavy silk robes, Maggie and Gambon would engage in endless, rapid-fire banter. Gambon loved pushing boundaries just to see if he could make the famously sharp-witted Maggie crack a smile during a serious shot. On her part, Maggie adored Gambon's complete absence of pretension. She admired how he could effortlessly transition from cracking a dirty joke off camera to delivering an awe-inspiring, magnificent monologue the very second the director shouted, "Action!" To Maggie, Gambon was a rare artistic soul, a performer of colossal, unmatched raw talent who approached acting with the joyful lightness of a child at play. Before Gambon took up the crescent-shaped spectacles, however, there was the original Dumbledore, the legendary Irish actor Richard Harris. Harris brought a totally different flavor of theatrical majesty to the set, an old-school Hollywood wild man who possessed an undeniable courtly charm and a booming, classical presence. Maggie's affection for Harris was rooted in a profound respect for his incredible artistic legacy and his charismatic, larger-than-life spirit. Working with Harris on the first two Harry Potter films brought a quiet, dignified warmth to Maggie's experience on set. Harris treated Maggie with the utmost chivalry, treating her not just as a colleague, but as a true equal in the pantheon of acting greats. She delighted in his legendary storytelling ability, listening intently as he spun grand, hilarious yarns about his notorious nights out in 60s London, alongside fellow Hellraisers like Peter O'Toole and Richard Burton. Maggie admired how Harris brought a gentle fairy tale magic to his portrayal of Dumbledore, shielding the young child actors from the stress of production while delivering a performance steeped in immense emotional depth. When Harris tragically passed away in 2002, Maggie was deeply moved by the loss of a true theatrical gentleman. Yet when Gambon stepped seamlessly into the starry robes, bringing a vibrant, energetic new life to the role, Maggie welcomed her old friend with open arms. Together, Maggie and her two Dumbledores represented the absolute pinnacle of British performance art. For Maggie, working alongside Harris and Gambon wasn't merely about filming blockbuster fantasy movies, it was about sharing the screen with her artistic brothers, men who understood the precise weight of a theatrical line, who shared her bone-deep love for the stage, and who could make her laugh until her ribs ached in the middle of a 12-hour shoot day.
They gave her a sense of creative comfort, proving that even in a world of green screens and giant digital spiders, true theatrical magic lived in the eyes of the person standing opposite you. While Hogwarts gave her a family of wizards, her heart belonged to a bond forged long before cinema cameras ever rolled, a sisterhood written in starlight. If there was one person on Earth whom Maggie Smith loved with absolute unconditional devotion, it was Dame Judi Dench. Their bond wasn't just a simple Hollywood friendship. It was an epic, 6-decade-long sisterhood that defined the modern era of British theatre and cinema. Long before either woman became a dame of the British Empire, long before global blockbusters, red carpet glamour, and international Lifetime Achievement Awards, they were just two young, wildly passionate women navigating the high-stakes, sweat-stained world of the 50s London stage scene. Their story began in 1957, inside the storied walls of the Old Vic Theatre. Maggie and Judi were in their early 20s, filled with raw, electric talent, boundless ambition, and a shared, infectious passion for the performing arts. From the very moment their paths crossed, an immediate spark ignited. They quickly realized that they shared the exact same irreverent sense of humor, the same relentless work ethic, and a deep-seated refusal to take the pretentiousness of the acting world too seriously. They grew up together in the spotlight, witnessing every single triumph, setback, heartbreak, and theatrical breakthrough in each other's early lives. Over the next several decades, their parallel careers repeatedly intertwined, producing some of the most celebrated, award-winning moments in cinematic history. Audiences around the world watched their breathtaking on-screen chemistry unfold in legendary films like A Room with a View, 1985, Tea with Mussolini, 1999, Ladies in Lavender, 2004, and The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel series. Whenever Maggie and Judi shared a frame, sheer magic happened. Their profound comfort with one another allowed them to bounce off each other's energy seamlessly, trading subtle glances, sharp quips, and unspoken comedic timing that only two people who genuinely loved each other deeply could ever hope to pull off. Off-camera, their relationship was a delightful mixture of constant teasing, fierce protection, and profound emotional support. Maggie loved to tease Judi relentlessly about her incredible popularity and drawer full of acting awards, often delivering hilariously sharp, sarcastic quips during high-profile joint interviews. Yet, right behind that playful banter lay an undeniable, awe-inspired respect. Maggie frequently spoke of Judi's raw talent with genuine reverence, admiring how Judi could step onto a lit stage and effortlessly capture the heart of every single person sitting in the auditorium. Judi, in turn, openly expressed her profound love and admiration for Maggie's singular genius, calling her a masterclass performer who could make an entire theater roar with laughter or break into tears with nothing more than a subtle shift of her eyes. Their brilliant dynamic was famously captured in the heartwarming 2018 documentary Nothing Like a Dame, where they sat alongside fellow acting powerhouses Joan Plowright and Eileen Atkins. Surrounded by tea, wine, and decades of shared memories, Maggie and Judi displayed the pure, unvarnished beauty of their friendship for the camera. They gossiped, laughed until they were practically weeping, argued good-naturedly about misremembered stage productions from 40 years prior, and showed the entire world what 6 full decades of unbroken trust, loyalty, and deep love truly looked like in real life. Crucially, their unbreakable bond was forged in the heavy fires of life's most painful personal trials. They leaned on each other through bitter divorces, scary health diagnoses,
and the overwhelming, crushing grief of losing their life partners. When Judy tragically lost her husband, Michael Williams, in 2001, and when Maggie grieved the heartbreaking loss of her true soulmate, Beverly Cross, they were each other's primary rock. They didn't need grand, theatrical gestures or superficial Hollywood platitudes. They offered quiet presence, a listening ear, shared memories, and an empathetic understanding that only a lifelong sister in spirit could ever provide. What ultimately made Maggie's deep love for Judy so uniquely special was how completely authentic and unpretentious it remained across their entire lives. In an entertainment industry notorious for superficial connections, fleeting workplace alliances, and fierce professional rivalries, Maggie and Judy built a fortress of a relationship based on unwavering loyalty, mutual pride, and a total absence of jealousy. They celebrated each other's career victories with the exact same excitement as if they were their own personal accomplishments. To watch Maggie Smith speak about Judi Dench in her later years was to watch a notoriously guarded, private woman let her defense walls crumble down entirely. The sharp, intimidating posture and razor-edged tongue vanished instantly, replaced by a radiant warmth, joyful laughter, and a tender, affectionate glow. Their lifelong sisterhood proved to the world that while fame, film roles, and standing ovations inevitably come and go, a deep, soul-stirring love between two true friends is the single greatest award a person can ever win. Beyond the glitz of the stage and screen, however, Maggie's heart faced its most turbulent and passionate trials in her personal life. The storm before the calm. Sir Robert Stevens. Long before Maggie Smith found the quiet, steady love that would define her later years, her heart belonged to one of the most brilliant, magnetic, and deeply volatile actors in British history, Sir Robert Stevens. Their relationship was a whirlwind of intoxicating passion, profound artistic synergy, and intense heartbreak-inducing drama. A fiery romance that captured the imagination of the London theatre world while quietly devastating Maggie's private heart. When Maggie first crossed paths with Robert Stevens in the 60s, he was considered the undisputed golden boy of the British stage. Charismatic, handsome, and wildly gifted, Robert possessed a theatrical power that captivated audiences and critics alike. Maggie, already a formidable talent in her own right, was drawn to his fierce intellect and magnetic energy. They were two titans of the acting world, and when they looked at each other, the spark was immediate and explosive. They were hopelessly, madly in love. In 1967, the pair officially tied the knot, instant royalty in the West End and at Laurence Olivier's Royal National Theatre. On stage and screen, their artistic chemistry was pure magic. They starred opposite each other in acclaimed productions like The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, 1969, the very film that earned Maggie her first Academy Award. To the outside world, they were the ultimate power couple, floating through glamorous opening night parties and basking in global critical acclaim. Yet behind the curtain, their marriage was a turbulent, emotional storm. Robert was a man of huge appetites, for fame, for alcohol, and for attention, and his personal demons increasingly strained their household. As Maggie's career skyrocketed into international superstardom, Robert struggled with his own professional insecurities, leading to deep marital tensions. Despite the overwhelming chaos, Maggie's love for Robert was fiercely loyal. She fought endlessly to save him from his self-destructive spirals, desperately trying to keep their home life stable for the sake of their two young sons, Chris Larkin and Toby Stevens. Raising their boys in the center of this hurricane, Maggie prioritized being a protective, loving mother above all else. She shielded Chris and Toby from the worst of the marital decay, instilling in them a deep resilience and an unwavering sense of family. Ultimately, both sons would follow in their parents' footsteps to become incredibly successful actors, a testament to the artistic gifts and loving upbringing Maggie provided despite the emotional turmoil. By 1975, After years of heartbreaking conflict and infidelity, the marriage reached its breaking point, ending in a painful, high-profile divorce. The heartbreak hit Maggie with devastating force. Yet even in the wake of their split, Maggie never allowed bitterness to erase the genuine love and admiration she had felt for his genius. She recognized Robert's extraordinary artistic gifts and spoke of him with a complex, nuanced affection, acknowledging both the deep pain and the brilliant joy he had brought into her world. Robert Stevens was the storm that tested Maggie's strength, forcing her to build the ironclad emotional defenses she would carry for the rest of her life. He was a passionate, chaotic chapter of her story, the fiery first love that taught her just how much her heart could endure before she was finally ready to find her peaceful, forever harbor. Yet, out of the ashes of a fiery first marriage, fate was quietly preparing to reunite her with the true love of her life. The great, enduring love, Beverly Cross. If Sir Robert Stevens was the fiery storm of Maggie Smith's youth, the playwright Beverly Cross was her forever harbor, the absolute, undisputed love of her life. Their love story didn't follow a neat, conventional Hollywood script. Instead, it was a sweeping, romantic epic spanning over 4 decades, defined by patience, tragic timing, and a quiet, soul-deep devotion that survived against all odds. Maggie and Beverly's story actually began in the mid-50s, long before her rise to global stardom. Beverly was a brilliant young writer who fell instantly, hopelessly in love with Maggie the moment he saw her perform on stage. He was completely mesmerized by her sharp mind, her breathtaking talent, and her radiant spirit. Beverly made his feelings clear, but life threw a heartbreaking obstacle in their path. He was already married, and by the time his divorce was finally finalized, Maggie had already fallen into the whirlwind romance with Robert Stevens. Beverly was utterly crushed, but his love for Maggie was so profound, so unselfish, that he chose to stay in her orbit as a constant, supportive friend. He watched from the sidelines as she navigated her brilliant career, married Robert, and eventually endured a painful, heartbreaking divorce. Throughout those turbulent years, Beverly remained her quiet guardian angel, waiting patiently for the moment she might finally look his way again. In 1975, following the agonizing end of her first marriage, fate finally opened the door. Maggie was bruised, exhausted, and wary of romance, but Beverly was right there, offering unconditional warmth, steady stability, and a gentle heart. They married that very same year, embarking on a 23-year chapter of pure, uninterrupted happiness. Beverly didn't just love Maggie the actress. He cherished Maggie, the person, the private, funny, down-to-earth woman who simply wanted a quiet home away from the piercing lights of the theater world. For Maggie, marrying Beverly felt like stepping out of a raging tempest and into warm sunshine. He was her absolute rock, her safest haven, and her intellectual equal. Beverly embraced her 2 sons, Chris and Toby, with open arms, providing the steady, loving father figure and peaceful domestic environment the family so desperately needed. With Beverly by her side, Maggie experienced a profound personal and creative flourishing, knowing she had a partner who celebrated her triumphs without a single shred of jealousy or ego. When Beverly tragically passed away in 1998, following a prolonged illness, the loss devastated Maggie to her core. It was a grief so immense, so heavy, that it reshaped her entire outlook on life. In rare, deeply vulnerable interviews years later, Maggie spoke of Beverly with a tender, heartbreaking longing that brought tears to audiences worldwide. When a journalist once asked her if she ever felt lonely after his passing, Maggie replied with her characteristic honesty, "It seems completely pointless, going on your own and not having someone to share it with." She firmly refused to ever marry again, holding fast to the belief that once you have experienced the ultimate, perfect love of a man like Beverly Cross, nothing else in the world could ever compare. Beverly was her true north, her greatest champion, and the keeper of her heart. While the world will forever remember Dame Maggie Smith for her extraordinary talent and iconic roles, those who knew her best understood that her greatest, most cherished masterpiece was the quiet, timeless love she shared with the man who waited 20 years just to hold her hand. When the final curtain falls on a life so grandly lived, it isn't the awards or the applause that remain. With love, Maggie. When the final curtain falls on a life as extraordinary as Dame Maggie Smith's, it isn't the glittering Oscars, the standing ovations, or the iconic movie lines that truly define her story. It's the deep, uncompromising love she poured into the few who earned her trust. From championing a 9-year-old Daniel Radcliffe and sharing quiet giggles with Alan Rickman and the Dumbledores, to her legendary sisterhood with Judi Dench, Maggie guarded her inner circle with the same fierce loyalty she brought to the stage. And while Robert Stevens tested her strength, it was Beverly Cross who held her heart forever. She was a legend on screen, but off-camera, she was a woman who loved with absolute, breathtaking depth. If you enjoyed taking this magical journey into the lives of acting royalty, hit that subscribe button and stick around for more legendary stories.